United Nations during this climate week of the 77th General Assembly. As you may know, the Secretary General Guterres, he opened our General Assembly this week, reminding us that the UN's work every day, since we were created 77 years ago, is to advance peace, human rights, and sustainable development. And I think, colleagues, what's exciting about that role is to look at the state of our world today and all of its challenges, from conflict in Ukraine and beyond to climate change, to broken global financial systems that perpetuate inequality and vulnerability, to inequality and hunger and poverty, to divisions and mistrust. Each of these perils risk pushing the Sustainable Development Goals further out of reach. And yet we know development cannot wait. Educating our children cannot wait. Dignified jobs cannot wait. Equality for women and girls cannot wait. And it's the very ethos that created the UN, that created the Joint SDG Fund. We were created by the General Assembly in 2018 to bring about even more change. We are a radical impact startup embedded inside the UN development system. And we want to connect Silicon Valley to the innovative ideas of the developing world. We want to take Wall Street to the coral reef funds of Fiji and Hollywood to the Rural Impact Fund of Malawi. And so far, our scrappy, innovative startup has invested over $237 million in 118 countries. These are innovations that blend public and private financing. So public financing from our very generous member state donors and governments, private financing from private foundations, high net worth individuals. And this financing is to protect our oceans. It's to empower rural farmers so that they can send their kids to school. It's to challenge the status quo of discrimination and inequality. It includes funding in response to the impacts of the war in Ukraine, as the global ripple effects perpetuate rising food, fuel, and fertilizer prices. And it includes a focus on the small island developing states, which are particularly vulnerable to climate change. Finally, it seeks to create capital markets where they don't yet exist, to take them to the least developed countries and to really crowd in investors, both from the retail and from the institutional side. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention what an honor it is every day for me to work for the United Nations. I've met mothers in feeding centers in Southern Sudan during famine. I've worked beside human rights advocates who are afraid for their lives in Kenya. I've engaged young people in rural provinces in Mozambique, and again, across every country, every duty station where I've served, I've seen hope, resilience, and inspiration. And friends, today is a hopeful, inspirational day at the General Assembly of the United Nations. And that is due to the tremendous commitment and leadership of two individuals who made today possible. And they are the co-founders of this breakthrough alliance on tech and media funders for acceleration of the SDGs. This partnership intends to bring together the multi-stakeholders, the multi-sector stakeholders that you're already seeing today in thought leadership, in catalyzing investments, in learning from innovative projects, in learning from global policy initiatives to really drive SDG awareness, both in the US and of course, around the world. So without further ado, it is my absolute pleasure to introduce Ms. Radhika Shah, the co-president of the Stanford Angels and Entrepreneurs Group, and Mr. Keith Coleman, Distinguished Visiting Scholar Emeritus Media X at Stanford University, and co-founder of the Stanford Angels and Entrepreneurs of Southern California. Radhika and Keith, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lisa, and thank you, Joint SDG Fund team, including Liz and Elaine. A warm welcome to all participants from around the world. Honored to be virtually in community with you during Climate Week at UNGA. In this moment, when the UN leadership had called on us to find solutions through solidarity, sustainability, and science, I am so excited to co-found and co-chair along with Keith this catalytic breakthrough alliance of tech and media funders for acceleration of the SDGs, a collaboration, innovation, think and action tank of sorts within the UN system under the auspices of the Joint SDG Fund. And with the spirit of public-private partnerships, cross-sectoral, cross-regional collaboration, leveraging the power of technology, science, media, markets, and entrepreneurship. Having spent formative years in the backdrop of the Gandhi Ashram in India, to me, the SDGs enshrine and scale the Gandhian ethos of viewing a relationship to nature as that of a custodian rather than viewing nature as a resource for us to exploit. As a UN child, having grown up in multiple countries, being part of a global Stanford community at Stanford Angels and Entrepreneurs, where 2,000 plus alumni, faculty, students from around the world have come together to advance entrepreneurship, tech innovation, and investment. I am so thrilled today to be yet again part of a global family as we build this new alliance of brilliant technology, business, and science innovators, funders from the private sector and philanthropy, along with local and global policy makers, not just from Silicon Valley and Hollywood, where we are from, but also from across America and around the world, with a passion to combat climate crisis and create opportunities for all. The Alliance will identify barriers and opportunities, innovate on how we collaborate and co-create intersectional climate solutions, catalyze resources, and design equitable climate policy. If we are to break through in the midst of a pandemic, a code red climate crisis, in this last decade of SDG action, we will have to reimagine ourselves and our world from within and without. We will have to unlearn and relearn how we think, live, work, collaborate. The SDGs provide a global normative framework that makes us aware of the interconnectedness of climate change, not only to global warming, energy, oceans, life on land and water, sustainable production and consumption, but also to poverty, quality, health, and education for all, gender equality, livelihoods, and more. This interconnectedness is very much the spirit of this new alliance. We will focus on three core pillars at the alliance: accelerating and driving awareness of the SDGs in America and beyond, catalyzing a nexus of regional investors and funders and policymakers from the Silicon Valley and Hollywood area to bring the power of tech, media, and policy innovation and investment to advance the SDGs, and connecting the global community to bring the power of tech innovation and impact investing, as well as philanthropy to advance the SDGs. Several Stanford alumni, including leading industrialists, policymakers, and students are joining today's launch, along with other brilliant minds, eminent scientists, UN leaders, and more. Keith and I see a deep congruence in the American ethos of everyone being created equal, of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and the spirit of the SDGs of leaving no one behind, as well as with the Gandhian Martin Luther King philosophy of respecting the dignity of each and every human being, of dignity being grounded in self-reliance, economic empowerment, and sustainable inclusive workforce development. We believe this is a key moment for America to lead the charge in collaboration with our allies on advancing the SDGs for all Americans, for all humanity, to make these goals a reality and create opportunity for all in America and in our world. We'll be hearing now from Keith Coleman, co-founder and co-chair of this initiative. Over to you, Keith.
Thank you so much, Radhika. For the sake of sustainable development goals, we appreciate the United Nations family and express deep thanks to Lisa Kerbiel and the Joint SDG Fund team for their passion and professionalism. And greetings to folks joining us from around the globe and from America. We welcome this Climate Week at the UN General Assembly digital curated experience. Here today, we are humble and curious, recognizing the urgency of sustaining our planet, embracing the spirit of leaving no one behind, and creating opportunity for all. I am pleased to be a co-founder and co-chair with fellow Stanford alum Radhika Shah of this galvanizing breakthrough alliance of tech and media funders for the acceleration of the SDGs under this UN banner and Joint SDG Fund platform. Highlighting the space between philanthropy and social impact investing and local and global policy, this coalition may offer supportable investing guidelines and standards that use the power of tech, media, and markets to advance companies, enable people, and illuminate paths to social benefit. As an interdisciplinary thought leader and scholar emeritus with MediaX at Stanford University, the ethos of the SDGs were imbued in the power of our members' intellectual curiosity and drive for practical applications. It is this relationship between people, media, finance, and technology that can enhance and improve adoption of the SDGs. And we must retell this SDG story. You know, some might say that the UN has an identity challenge within the mindset of many who reside in America, and that the United Nations is not just a building in New York from a Marvel Avengers movie. This Breakthrough Alliance is an opportunity for the Joint SDG Fund to raise awareness and promote UN and US values as congruent, as Radhika described, and compatible and like-minded in sharing common interests in achieving the SDGs. We believe this is a key moment for the United States to reinvent, to recommit, and lead the change in collaboration with the global community on advancing the SDGs for all of humanity and for Americans. American ethos has the SDGs written all over it. Sometimes we just don't call it that. SDG America is not an oxymoron. It is a need. It is real as the water crises in Jackson, Mississippi, as the water scarcity in San Joaquin Valley, California, to food insecurity in the Appalachians, to the floods in the Midwest and wildfires in the Pacific North. It may be important for us to view the SDGs in a layered framework, global, national, state, and a local prism. This vertical integration might assist in positive interventions that are scalable through public and private financing to countries by 2030 through the support of tech and media storytelling. This SDG narrative can be uplifted by corporate, news, entertainment, and sports, and individual storytellers and message makers. Communicating the SDG why in compelling fashions. And here, the connectivity between the arts, humanities, and social sciences may positively affect decision tree analysis and drive human flourishing, narrating how SDGs are good for all and driving active involvement. Motivation affects choices. The Breakthrough Alliance also hopes to identify and empower youth and student voices. The SDGs are active in many school environments across the country where hardworking, committed administrators, teachers, aides, cafeteria workers, and janitors, the educator family, are working to provide flourishing environments for young learners in STEM, project-based learning, and career technical education. In this week of action, young people remain very concerned about climate change. And as policymakers, technologists, and educators, we cannot just bring facts to them. It is important to provide places for students to share emotions, discuss ways to act, marshaling 21st century learning options, and offering paths to innovative solutions. Once again, the Alliance aims to partner with multi-sector stakeholders to provide inspiring thought leadership programs, catalyzing support and implementing projects that drive SDG awareness and investment. And the Alliance sees value in 4 intersections of government: global, national, state, and local. And here, public-private partners must understand that social enterprise is not charity. It's good business and good for people, and that reducing poverty and other challenges must be combined with policies that spur investment, economic development, better healthcare, and learning, and resetting inequality. The Inflation Reduction Act, federal policy. The state of California is innovating with catalytic finance models with new types of incentives that support the spirit of the SDGs. Through State Treasurer Fiona Ma's leadership, one example is the newly announced California Dream for All program, which uses a shared appreciation model that gives the state the ability to invest its budget surplus into a revolving investment fund, allowing the state to invest in loans alongside first-time home buyers, including women and communities of color, who often get left behind. And locally, SDGs can support public health innovation to mitigate disparities in care for underrepresented patients through funding research and healthcare startups. And this racial justice investing advocacy aims to build equitable institutions through identifying commitment of socially principled investors and evaluating the role of wealth and capital in persisting injustice. Being a part of the global Stanford Angels and entrepreneur community of alumni, faculty, and students, we collaborate in directing entrepreneurship, tech innovation, and investment with SDG values deeply in mind. As Radhika described, a number of Stanford alumni, industrialists, policymakers, and students are joining today's launch, and thank you for that, along with brilliant folks, California legislators, scientists, technologists, and UN leaders. Once again, Radhika and I see the SDGs as American as mom and apple pie. The SDGs can drive actionable practices and solutions to intersectional challenges across the globe and in the US. And this is a critical time for the US to reimagine and deliver SDGs for humanity and Americans alike. So back to you, Radhika.
Thank you, Keith. We are thrilled to start today's program with special keynote remarks from one of the world's most brilliant thought leader industrialists joining us from Mumbai. It's an honor to introduce a fellow Stanford alum, Mr. Nadir Godrej. Mr. Godrej is a chairman and managing director of Godrej Industries Limited and chairman of Godrej Agrovet Limited. Mr. Godrej is also passionate about science and is an inspiring poet who has composed powerful collections of poems in English and French. Mr. Godrej is a co-chair of the Godrej Good and Green Governing Council. He holds a master's degree in chemical engineering from Stanford University and an MBA from Harvard Business School. He has been a director of several Godrej companies since 1977 and has developed the animal feed agriculture inputs and chemical businesses of Godrej Industries and other associate companies, and has been very active in research. Mr. Godrej is deeply committed to the good and green strategies and achievement of set targets for the Godrej Group. He encourages and supports a shared vision for all programs of good and green. Mr. Godrej has been awarded the Chevalier de Légion d'Honneur Award and also Lifetime Achievement Awards from the Oil Technologies Association of India, Chemaxil, the All India Liquid Bulk Importers and Exporters Association. His family does amazing philanthropy on climate change and nature conservation and more. Welcome, Nadir. We are so thrilled and honored to have you with us.
Thank you, Radhika. Thank you for organizing this conference on the importance of SDGs. I'm going to focus right now on climate change. It is no longer climate change within a tolerable range. A crisis is what it's about, with fires, floods, as well as drought. Every week, a constant blast, far worse than seen in the past. If we must, we will adapt. Prevention, though, would be more apt. There is a cost to adaptation. It's rising fast in every nation, as well as for the world at large. And this will be a heavy charge. In fact, we should by now conclude prevention would be really shrewd. It actually would cost much less, indeed avoid a lot of stress. A uniform carbon tax would protect all our backs, collected by each nation state, but universal in its rate. All GHGs would be fair game. Every country should charge the same. The benefit that this would yield would be a level playing field. Competitors just wouldn't care because the system's very fair. Just how high should this tax be? A range of numbers we can see, but $60 per metric ton would surely get reduction done. For carbon, this could be the rate. For others, we would calibrate. The appropriate rate we would select based on the greenhouse gas effect. Based on today's emissions rate, quite candidly, I should state, it wouldn't be a trivial sum. But there's no reason to be glum. In dollars, it would be 2 trillion. It's a lot, but not a zillion. Compared to global GDP, the percentage is less than 3. Compared to taxes, then again, the percentage is less than 10. Of course, some would then take a call to reduce emissions, not pay at all. But bear in mind, it's not a cost. The economy, nothing's lost. A UBI could be instated, some other tax could be abated. And if this is indeed just so, the economy would still grow. Don't you think it's very nice that there is no real price, since very little would be lost, as adaptation has a higher cost? But in the absence of a carbon tax, there is no reason to relax. Though business doesn't find it nice, we already have a carbon price, or rather we seem to have a range that is ad hoc and very strange. On coal, we have a largish cess. Our electricity rates are a mess. Our motor fuels bear excise with rates that regularly rise. Climate change is now a curse. It steadily is getting worse. Technology can save the day. So far, it has turned out the way. As technology takes a leap, green energy gets very cheap. Keen observers quickly saw that solar also tracks Moore's law. Whether groundnut shell or bagasse, our India's full of biomass. At first, we thought we'd have to spend, but that's not true. For in the end, the more we thought, the more we slaved. We did invest, but we also saved. And solar is still getting cheaper. And as we do start digging deeper, in India, it will hit the goal of being cheaper than even coal in just a handful of years. Already, we and our peers are sourcing solar electricity at lower rates than from the utility. For quite some time, we've been extorted as their finances aren't still sorted. The silver lining can be seen. All this incentivizes green. There are many paths that we can see for achieving carbon neutrality, but the cheapest way is certainly through energy efficiency. In times of plenty, it was fine to overuse and overdesign, but now we find we always gain if we only use our brain. Real interest rates are very low, and high returns quickly flow from any energy-saving device. For business, this is very nice. Not only are returns quite brisk, there's also very little risk. In India, mandated CSR can help us go very far. Multiple benefits is what one sees. With water projects or growing trees, good livelihoods are created, our carbon emissions are abated, trees planted at a river source maintain the flow throughout its course. So many benefits we can see. The preservation of biodiversity. Now, different species can be tried. Useful products can be supplied, like biomass or edible fruits. And yet, the trunks and the roots can sequester carbon, clean the air, a win-win that is very fair. Thank you.
Mr. Godrej, that was absolutely incredible. I think I speak for everyone on the line that you've inspired us and you've managed to set the tone and the bar very, very high for the following guests today. So thank you so much for that inspiring keynote. Would you like to offer any other comments or insights? Would you like to, sort of discuss a little bit more about your views? You're most welcome.
And I had a question as well, Lisa, for Nadir, if I may. Yeah, and absolutely would welcome your thoughts and insights. And so inspiring, Nadir. Thank you again. That was so powerfully recited and so inspiring. Nadir, I had one question to add on to also whatever insights you'd like to share, is what do you see as being the most powerful lever we can tweak to accelerate progress on combating climate change in an inclusive, equitable manner?
Right. We have to understand that rich countries have emitted much more carbon than poor countries, and within nations, the rich have emitted much more greenhouse gases than the poor. And your idea of financing is a very good way to address the balance. We should make sure that a lot of finances go to new technologies, because new technologies are the solution. New technologies create equity, new technologies solve the problems, whatever the problems, social problems, climate change, nature conservancy, all of these can be done with new technologies. We need financing, and we need to make sure that poorer countries and the poor in rich countries can benefit from this finance.
Thank you, Nadir. And if any other perspectives you'd like to leave with us right now as we move to the next section?
Yeah, I really think that climate change is a problem we can solve. And as I mentioned in my poem, adaptation is very costly, prevention is cheaper. Unfortunately, one has to share the burden. That's why it's very difficult to accept. But if there's a fair, simple formula for sharing the burden, it makes much better sense for all of us to share the burden and solve this problem once and for all, rather than spend more money on adaptation.
Thank you, Nadir. That is such a powerful insight. And perhaps that's something the Breakthrough Alliance can take kind of to bring global leaders together to brainstorm on what could be that formula that could help us break through on this collaboration and creating the not just the right incentives, but the solutions. Thank you. And thank you again for joining and inspiring us today. And again, thanks for you and your family's lifetime dedication and long history of conserving our planet, environment, public health, and the spirit of helping society, not just business leadership and poetry, but that spirit of public service has made a huge change in India. Thank you for that. Over to you, Lisa.
Thank you so much. Again, thank you so much, Mr. Godrej. And we will keep your very relevant point about investing as a theme, I think, throughout today, because the very point of the Joint SDG Fund is to be a de-risking, to be a first loss investor, to really promote the new technologies that can help accelerate the SDGs. So well noted. Friends, colleagues, we're moving along to the next part of our program, which is a moderated discussion between two very interesting leaders, Mr. Stephen Jackson and Dr. Rajesh Gopakumar. Stephen is a dear friend. He is the head of the United Nations in Kenya. He brings close to 30 years of experience in international development, peace building, and humanitarian affairs. He's worked for over 10 years in sub-Saharan Africa, most recently serving as resident coordinator in Gabon, and has held leadership positions across the Department of Political Affairs and UN peacekeeping. At the same time, he's joined by Dr. Rajesh Gopakumar, who is a theoretical physicist and the director of the International Center for Theoretical Sciences in Bangalore, India. So, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us on this this dialogue. If you'll allow me, Stephen, I'll begin with you, because I've had the privilege of also working inside of Kenya, and UN inside Kenya obviously is working with government to focus on many key issues, innovation being a primary one. Could you share some of the innovative support that you, as leading the UN, are trying to bring to do everything from fight inequality to respond to emergencies and beyond? Over to you, Stephen.
Yeah, thanks so much, Lisa, Radhika, Keith, Rajesh, and everybody, friends. Thanks so much for the opportunity. And thanks, by the way, for evening the score up a bit. It was getting a bit Stanford there at the beginning. So it's great to have Rajesh and me here, both Princeton alumni, to even up the score a little bit, bring in a little bit of East Coast as well, I think. Joking aside, so we have here in Kenya what we call Silicon Savannah, and that's not just a slogan. That's a real multi-billion-dollar tech hub that is home already to hundreds of startups and very established firms, multinationals like IBM, Intel, Microsoft. And they're working to drive Kenya and Africa towards the SDGs, of course, through tech, though, as Wired magazine put it a few years ago, here the problems are a little bit different than using tech to find a parking spot or get your laundry folded. You've got startups that are doing, trying to connect off-the-grid schools via solar-powered routers, or startups using electronic waste and affordable 3D printers that spit out artificial limbs. So this is a tech innovation space. It's also, by the way, a financial innovation space that Lisa, you know very well. This is the headquarters in Africa for impact financing, for blended financing for the SDGs, for fintech of all kinds. So starting a couple of years ago, my predecessor in this role as resident coordinator for Kenya tried to bring together Silicon Savannah and the Silicon Valley. And now we're very excited to be doing that also with Hollywood tonight. It began in 2019. Bringing together actually Berkeley rather than Stanford, Center for Effective Global Action, Rockefeller Foundation, and Kenya's ICT Ministry. They signed a joint agreement to accelerate SDG solutions and impacts. That led first off to establishing a thing called the SDG Accelerator Lab here in Kenya and with the government, and then also through our SDG partnership platform, which is really the crown jewel of what we do in UN Kenya, and as the name suggests, gives birth to innovative public-private partnership for the SDGs. There was a joint mission in January 2020 between Government of Kenya officials, Kenyan entrepreneurs to Silicon Valley. hugely successful agreement to engage with leading tech corporations and innovators, foster stronger links between the Valley and the Savannah. January 2020, just before COVID hit us. So we've been a little bit knocked back by that. But the joint engagements have continued. And Lisa, if you're going to give me a second question later on in this panel, I'd be delighted to just put on the table 2 or 3 examples of the kinds of ways that we've been using high-tech approaches to really crack some very concrete problems around the SDGs. What I would say, we've just had the installation of a new and democratically elected Kenyan government, a very peaceful democratic transition of power here. Lisa, you know that's not always the case, and it was wonderfully quiet, peaceful, dignified, smooth. And we have a young president who is really focused on youth entrepreneurship and on the digital frontier. In fact, at the GA just yesterday, making his first speech there, he called for, and I'm quoting now, stronger global partnerships to bridge the yawning digital divide. And that's the kind of partnership that we're launching together today with this Breakthrough Alliance. So let's do this. I'd love to do and lead another mission from Kenya to Silicon Valley, or maybe we can do it the other way around. Maybe we can have Hollywood and the Valley come to the Silicon Savannah. Let me just hand back to you then, Lisa, but as I do, let me give a real shout out to Radhika, to Keith, to Tamina, and to you, Lisa, for your leadership. The Joint SDG Fund, friends, is really the motor force behind all of this. So thanks so much.
Stephen, thank you so much. I do hope that we can come back to you for some of those examples as we progress through the panel. We just do have a few speakers with hard stops, so forgive me now for moving forward, but I do think your leadership there and the opportunities that Kenya exemplifies are really quite extraordinary. And the momentum that's already been built with Radhika and others' leadership is something that we will definitely seek to take full advantage of. So thank you so much. Rajesh, if I may please turn to you. You've given your lifetime of work in the sciences, most notably in theoretical physics. And now you have a leadership role at the International Center for Theoretical Sciences in Bangalore, India. We would love to hear from you, Rajesh, about what you see as pivotal breakthroughs in science and tech as our planet seeks to move towards the SDGs. So Rajesh, over to you.
Thanks very much, Lisa, for having me in this discussion, and particularly thanks to Radhika, Keith, and it's very nice to join Stephen as well. As a scientist, I thought I would sort of be the voice of advocacy for basic sciences, which I think has a very important role to play in achieving the SDGs. If you don't mind, I'll just flash a couple of slides. It's, I think, the habit of us scientists to sort of to be able to say it better with things in front of us. So I'll give you also a view from India, and in addition to that. So science, I think, really can be a solution provider. And there are a number of issues, and Nadir very eloquently brought up many of these as well. But I think in all of these topics, climate, biodiversity, clean energy, and so on and so forth, basic sciences have a really important role to play. And this was in great evidence in the way we got out of the COVID through the rapid development of the vaccines. And this is the result of decades of deep investment in basic sciences. And I wanted to bring to the attention of this audience that this year, from July 2022 to September 23, is the International Year of Basic Sciences for Sustainable Development, the IYBSSD. And it's passed by the United Nations General Assembly by a resolution to highlight this aspect. And it brings together the global scientific community, funding agencies, academies, and research organizations. And from India, ICTS and TIFR is one of the the partners in this initiative. And this is the webpage, and I would encourage people to look at it, because you can see the topics, the themes. They are very much geared towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goals through the basic sciences and kind of advocating for increased funding, especially in the developing world, for basic sciences to address some of the problems that are faced. And just to give you a quick vignette of this, and what Lisa mentioned about what are the pivotal problems that science and technology can bring can help in. So the Indian monsoon, or the South Asian monsoon, which has been in the news, you must have all heard about the floods in Pakistan, and a little before that, even Bangalore, where I am, had a unprecedented flood here. And so this is something that affects a large fraction of the planet's population, and the system is a very complex one, and it requires scientists of various kinds, physicists, mathematicians, computer scientists, and so on, to understand this. So this is an example of a problem which will need to be addressed. And just like we did with the COVID, we can only do it if we invest in the sciences that can help us to develop that understanding. And in particular, for problems like these, I think major investment in the computational sciences and also in the data sciences, I think, are very crucial. And so we can't short circuit this long-term investment. The new technology that we all would like to see really comes from new science, and historically that's been always the case. And scientists, I think we can collectively, we are invested like everyone else in this planet to respond to these problems, and we'd like to sort of address them. And I think so we'll stand to gain if we use our brain, as Nadir just now said. So thanks again, and I'll be happy to elaborate more on some of these things.
Rajesh, thank you so much. I think if you'll allow us to continue with some of the other speakers, only because some of them have a difficult timeline today, and then we can come back with questions specific to your ideas around computational science and data science and those investments, if that's okay, because we will have time following the next session to have Q&A and more discussion. Is that all right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Wonderful. And then we'll be sure to share your slides, of course, with all the participants, and we'd be delighted to also put them up on our channels and things to that effect as well. So colleagues, what's very exciting about the next step is we're going into a California case study. So with extreme thanks to Stephen and Rajesh for bringing in the international perspective from India and Kenya. Now we're going into a case study that's really exciting, and we have 3 members of government, 3 California senators, a CEO of a venture capital firm, an educational specialist, a Stanford University student, and a young high school student. So we have a tremendous bandwidth in this panel, and we want to give them all opportunities to shine. If you allow me to break protocol ever so slightly, I'd like to invite Mr. Terry Tamminen to kick us off, just because I know he does have a hard stop, and we just want to get a few words in from an investor on the line, since part of our goal today is to ensure that we're learning as the UN and as partners and stakeholders for the SDGs of how to really reach investors. Terry, you're the CEO of AltaSea. You're also president of the 7th Generation Advisors and former secretary of the California Environmental Protection Agency. You're currently an author, a lecturer, a strategist on energy and the environment. You've worked with Governor of California Schwarzenegger, and we're the secretary of the California EPA. We'd love to hear, Terry, from you, your thoughts on the policy-driven ideas around blue economy. A large part of the Joint SDG Fund portfolio is actually focused on small island developing states, as I said, from Fiji to Barbados, Jamaica to Micronesia. we're trying to combat climate change by really de-risking investments in those small and medium enterprises. We know you're passionate about this space. We know you have perspective. What can we learn from you, Terry? How do we build a blue financing accelerator to crowd in private and public money to save the oceans? Over to you, Terry.
Well, thank you. I hope I have the rest of the day to answer that complicated question.
Simple question. Simple question.
Pleasure. By the way, the previous speakers and Mr. Godrej, your amazing poem. I can't say enough about how much I've enjoyed this discussion so far, and I wish I could stay on for the whole thing. I will say, and just in the interest of time, I'll try to be very brief, that I think, first of all, it's great that this initiative is underway because communication, or frankly, miscommunication, has been at the core of so much of the climate problem. And even with people who were not deniers or what have you in the beginning, but who thought we had 20 years to solve this, or maybe even today, they still think, okay, well, I see some fires and some floods, but that's not in my community. This is something the future will solve. And nothing could be farther from the truth, as we know. Of course, we also have to overcome those who have just been misinformed. So tech and media, I think, plays such an important role to mobilize, to inspire. Look at what's happened with the youth movement that has sprung up in the recent years. And I think actually is what gives me the most hope. But to your exact question, Lisa, I want to just say that I think what we're doing now is understanding that the conventional methods of finance haven't necessarily served, especially in the developing world, in terms of this equity concern that everyone has talked about today. That, look, in the global north, we do have electric cars and a lot of solar panels and commitments to get to zero emissions by certain dates, and California being the world's 5th largest economy, we're on that path very dramatically. We haven't just made the pledges, but we're proving we can do it. So it's really helping to figure out how to get these climate solutions at scale, and especially in island nations that could very well be underwater in 20, 30, 40, 50 years if we don't take action now. How do we scale this to everyone equitably and quickly? And I think that takes unique financing, not just unique technology. We tend to focus on the next gee whiz, solar panel or electric car or other technology, and not so much on how to finance projects to deploy these technologies all over the world quickly. And so there's things like the Subnational Climate Fund, which is anchored by the UN Green Climate Fund, also the Global Fund for Coral Reefs. In the interests of time, maybe I'll just put a link to those things in the chat for people to look those up on their own. But the key to blended finance is this notion that perhaps not everybody can offer concessional rates of return. If you're a pension fund, you can't tell your pensioners, well, you're going to get less money next year because we agreed to take less money on a risky deal in a developing country. So what you do is you take concessional capital from things like the Green Climate Fund, from program-related investors in philanthropy and other sources, and you blend that with conventional capital. So as little as 20%, 10 or 20% of the capital in a project or an investment in a company could be this concessional capital, and then that de-risks it and allows conventional capital to come in on top of that. But it does take these innovations in finance and then also in policy. I think this is why it's so great that so many people are on this call today that have a policy background, both from California and internationally, because we've got to lay the policy groundwork. We've got to make sure that the barriers to entry to some of these new technologies are lowered. And that's true all over the world. We've had problems like that here. One example being trying to get to zero waste is you've already got long-term contracts with waste haulers in every city to take waste to a landfill. And that's a very old method of dealing with waste. We should be reducing it in the first place and then converting everything else into something useful. But you got to unwind all those contracts and figure out what happens to the incumbent contractors or informal waste pickers in various countries and things like that in order to be equitable. So again, I would just emphasize the recipe is policy, technology, but then finance.
Fantastic, Terry. I'm delighted that you mentioned the Global Coral Reef Fund. That is one of the partners that we're already working with in our Fiji investment, where $6 million from the Joint Fund has been matched with $6 million from the Global Coral Reef Fund. members of the Walton family and others are now crowding in around that money. So I think you're right. How to get to that last mile is, I think, where we hope this Breakthrough Alliance will also help us just, socialize and engage so many of the other investors that we could try to bring that capital in. So thank you so much. I'm delighted to have you on the call and hope to see you as a member of the Breakthrough Alliance as this unfolds. And now I'm really delighted to, I have a trifecta. I have a trifecta of California senators, and I'm so honored to be able to introduce Mr. Ben Allen, Mr. Josh Becker, and Mr. John Laird. And if you don't mind, colleagues, I'll go in that order. So I'm going to be alphabetical to try to follow all protocol. Ben Allen is California Senator and chair of the Senate Environmental Quality Committee and co-chair of its Environmental Caucus. And given that you're working so much on these issues, you're working on legislation, Ben, that's prohibiting plastic. You're keeping a really focused eye on what recycling really means and if it's really being done or if it's wish cycling.
Right.
And then you're also working on a climate finance bill, which to me, I think is really groundbreaking and really informative for the fund. So would love to hear a little bit about your work around the finance bill, around the other legislation you've pushed through, and what you think that could mean in a global perspective. So over to you.
Well, thank you so much. It's so fantastic to have so many great people on the Zoom. I've been loving hearing about these international examples. Love to see you, Terry, and I'm going to go down to Alta-Sea, I think, next month. I do want to, I know that John and Josh are going to speak substantively about all the incredible work we were able to do this year on climate. I was part of this climate working group that John chaired, and we're really proud. I know Governor Newsom was just talking about it today in New York. I've been frustrated over the past couple of years with these massive Democratic majorities. We had made so little progress on meaningful environmental change in California, but this was the year. This was the year where we were finally able to deliver. And one of those topics, you're absolutely right. It really does closely relate to the 12th of the SDG goals, and that has to do with responsible consumption and production. And it ultimately it's something I want to spend a little bit of time talking about that I think merits some discussion. So we just passed this year. One of the many big successes that I'm proud of was the signature, the passage and signature of SB 54, which is the strongest measure that we have nationally, perhaps even globally, to address plastics pollution. It's a new program that seeks to move California toward a more circular economy. It takes on two of the biggest sources of waste, throwaway packaging and food serviceware. In a nutshell, our new law does three things. So it first requires that producers of single-use plastic packaging and foodware reduce, so just reduce the amount of material that they're bringing to market by 25% by 2032. This means moving toward more renewable packaging and foodware or eliminating unnecessary packaging altogether. Second, by 2032, all disposable packaging and foodware will have to be truly recyclable or compostable with rates and dates to ensure that it's actually getting turned into new material. Speaking to what your earlier point, a lot of people are throwing material that may be technically recyclable into the recycling bins, but they're actually not getting recycled in the end of the day. And in fact, they're actually making it harder for the recycling system to work. And then lastly, and this is super important, the measure shifts the financial burden of managing the end of life of this material from our local communities, our local governments, ultimately ratepayers, taxpayers, service recipients, shifts the cost from local government to the producers, the folks who actually have the most control over their products, through the creation of an extended producer responsibility system. And as I say, at its heart, this is centered on the 12th SDG goal, responsible consumption and production. But with that said, we also had some other goals in mind too. By requiring producers to ensure that their material is actually collected and recycled or composted, we're going to reduce marine and land-based litter, improve habitats within the ocean and our communities and our natural areas. While the connection between plastics and climate change is now only now starting to garner the level of attention that it deserves, a primary goal of our bill has always been to reduce reliance on fossil fuel extraction, especially for consumer goods that are used once, sometimes for only a couple minutes and then discarded. People may not know that, but I'm sure everyone on this call knows that plastics are absolutely a petroleum product, and it's becoming an important new growth area for the fossil fuel industry. And there's a lot of climate impact associated with both the production and the end use of plastic products. And that doesn't even start with the choking impact of plastic pollution on so many developing countries. Here's the other thing. Globally, innovative new companies have already started seeking to reduce plastic pollution with some alternatives for single-use products that can degrade if disposed of, or better, be composted. Others are finding ways to better recycle the material currently on the market. And we know, we're already seeing that the mandates, we passed this thing in June. It's not coming into effect until January, but we're already seeing that our bill is driving new industrial innovation and funding the creation of new infrastructure that's going to bolster a circular economy to be paid for appropriately by the producers who are profiting from putting this material on the market. And if I finally want to point out that a key feature that we included in SB 54 that's new to this policy space, but one that we're really proud of, the new program calls on plastic producers to pay a fee amounting to $5 billion over 10 years. It's going to be used to mitigate the impacts of plastic production and pollution. Importantly, it's going to be, the majority of that money is actually going to be directed to low-income communities and those that have borne the brunt of plastic pollution historically. And what's more, laced to the legislation is a fundamental understanding that this new program will leave no one behind. It's going to ensure that all communities will have access to proper end-of-life handling of disposable material and innovative new solutions. We plan to expand this model and identify other sectors that can be brought under an EPR framework to close the loop on waste and reduce reliance on virgin resources. And it's our hope that this model and others like it can be exported to other states and countries to multiply the impact that we have here in California. And we're very proud of the fact that this happened as a result of a negotiation. This is something actually that we negotiated with the business community. So it's a very strong environmental legislation, but it also had substantive input from the business community with really strong oversight protections from our department and our government, and strong engagement from our environmental community as well. So that's the plastics bill. We also have an innovative climate financing bill that we're trying to get across the finish line that has to do with creating a revolving loan fund for the purchase of and then ultimately renting out of properties that are going to be impacted by rising sea level rise. Our budget, and John can speak more about this. I think he will speak more about this. Has a lot of really innovative climate solutions. So I'm really looking forward to our broader discussion as a Senate team. We're so proud of the successes we've had this year, and we're really looking forward to helping to build on them next year.
Senator, when you were starting to talk about putting the onus, putting the responsibility back on the producer, it makes me think of so many of the developing countries that are inundated with the imported lowest quality products that literally at times have a lifeline or a lifetime of under 2 years. And so they just end up in tremendous dumps. And in the case of the small island developing states, they end up in the ocean because they don't have the management systems. A huge demand from those small island developing states, and Fiji being one of them, is waste management. Yep. So imagine if we could have some kind of global, back to even Nadir, the global tax, making this fair for all. Those at the bottom end of the supply chain delivery mechanisms are really always disadvantaged because they don't have the capacity to recycle. They have nowhere to actually put this. Their infrastructure literally doesn't allow for it because they're a small island. I mean, it just really begs for an analysis and a sharing out of those lessons. And I think the finance bill, is exactly relevant to the fund, because so much of what we're trying to do is position this, as Terry just pointed out, as a de-risking agent that could eventually actually talk to the pension funds of California, in a way that would sort of unite the desire of your citizenry, of your voters. Ben,
what Lisa was talking about was the idea that we have to start to incorporate climate risk and impact into our pension investments, and it's both the right thing to do morally, but it's also so important for us to do for the long-term benefit of our funds, given how fast the impacts of climate change have been. I mean, Terry talked about this.
Yeah, fantastic, Ben. I'm sure we'll come back to you. for more questions. I'm gonna go over to Josh now. This is Senator Becker, who is another California senator, also a Stanford University alum, former social impact investor and entrepreneur. So Josh, I'm really excited, given this nexus you have of community activism, social justice, tech, entrepreneurship. You know, these are this is the profile that we want to try to offer through the Joint SDG Fund to the developing countries and the projects that Stephen and Rajesh were kind of alluding to. What would you say, I mean, from where you sit, you have a new role now as a senator, but would you say that Silicon Valley has an offer on the SDGs? And if so, you know, how might we enter into that conversation?
Yeah, well, interesting. Well, first, thanks for all the other panels and great to see my colleagues. I miss you guys. You know, we've been out of session now. It's for a few weeks. But I am Stanford. Realize I'm drinking my Berkeley mug out of my Berkeley mug here, though, when I spoke at their conference last. Okay. So, yeah, listen, I think, you know, in terms of Silicon Valley, what social entrepreneurs and for-profit entrepreneurs can contribute, probably three things, you know, come to mind. I mean, number one is that Silicon Valley has always been the home of invention. So that's the number one job, I would say, is to continue to be that, continue to be inventing the technologies of the future. One of the ways, the bright sides, people talk about some bright sides, is that, you know, solar's come down 90% over 10 years, wind's come down 75% over 10 years. All these technologies are coming down. In that wonderful poem, we talked about Moore's law applying to solar, but things like vehicle to grid technology, of course, batteries, next generation batteries, building electrification. There's just so many ways we still need better technologies, making things cheaper, better, faster, and also inventing new things that are going to help move us forward. And that work for different regions around the world, things that may not be necessary here. A few of us went to Portugal to see floating offshore wind that they have in Portugal, because on the west coast of California, we can't have fixed wind. We need floating offshore wind, which they're already doing, which, by the way, a California company was contributing to. So that's really what that kind of the sharing piece, the invention piece. But secondly, I think the problem solving, that's just that mentality. Radhika Shah, who invited me here today, worked very closely with the Stanford Angels and Entrepreneurs, that she knows so well, is that Valley entrepreneurs like hard problems, and it's really in their DNA. And when something doesn't work the first time, they get laser focused and go back at it. And almost every startup is, almost by definition, there is sort of the brave new world, but a lot of it is where you're actually going after a big entrenched incumbent, and people don't give you a lot of chance to succeed, and you have to figure out how to go into this established industry and beat this big entrenched incumbent. And of course, that's what we're doing here in many of these areas. We're displacing the big entrenched use of fossil fuels in all these areas. So I'd say that's the second part. So don't let fear get in the way. Know that we can do this. And these shifts sometimes, although they may seem really hard, at the end, they can happen pretty quickly. And I'd say as policymakers, you know, as part of our job is to set the conditions to let them flourish, right? We know the technology is now there. When I started doing this, you know, 25, 30 years ago, I was a consultant for EPA. We did the first Clean Air Marketplace Conference for EPA in 1992. So there was some neat technology, but the technology was not really there to get to zero emissions. But now the technology is there. It's really up to us as policymakers to create those frameworks and create those goals and targets, and many things that we worked on with Senator Laird's leadership, with our climate working group that we worked on with this last go round. So the piece. And then lastly, I just say that, you know, when I think about representing Silicon Valley, you know, we need our cities, we need our state, of course, but also our cities and our regions to be incubators of innovation, in the sense of try new policies. So try things first, like REACH codes. So for all electric new construction, now people are looking at burnout ordinances. We need cities to help lead the way. Then we can say, hey, this worked here. This was a great program around building electrification because it actually paid contractors and enable them to now be advocates for electrification, whatever it is. I got $4 million in our state budget from Menlo Park to work with Block Power, which is this really innovative for-profit company that partnered first with Ithaca, New York, to say, hey, not everybody needs to buy their own heat pump, their own this, their own that, get their own contractor. Let's electrify at scale by working together and financing, pay things for things over time. So that's really what I would see in answer to your question.
Well, thank you, Senator Becker. I think, perspective from the example of California is really inspiring. I think I loved your example of Portugal, because my mind immediately goes to the coast of Mombasa, and where Stephen would love to see some floating power opportunities in East Africa, right? I think, we have to think big, and we have to sort of think about how to overcome those obstacles. So thank you for all of your leadership. Thank you for all of this practical kind of, insider thinking, because I do think sometimes when you're at the UN, when we're working internationally, it can feel like we're very far away. But in fact, sessions like today make us feel very, very connected and make the world feel very, very small, which I think is very exciting. So thank you so much. Next up is another California State Senator, Mr. John Laird, District 17, Chair of the Senate Climate Working Group. Senator, I know your colleagues have already referenced that you've been working jointly on a lot of this legislation. You've got a lifetime of public service, social justice advocacy. You're obviously a climate activist. Is there a case study in the making from this event today that how we could break through to investors, that we could connect the dots, between this this demand for sustainability, this reality that we all know of climate change, to how we can take that worldwide? I mean, do you have any sort of reflections on how we might take these great examples above and beyond the borders of the US? Over to you.
Thank you. It's great to be with you, and I'm tempted to say good morning, but I know it's not morning in most of the other places, and I wish I could be with you, and I'll look forward to being with a lot of you in Egypt when we're there in November. And it is great to follow my two colleagues who were both on the climate working group and who have both taken leadership positions, and Ben showed it in plastics, and Josh didn't toot his horn loud enough on cement, of all things, where he has really been a leader. And I think the answer to your question actually ties together a lot of the presentations we've heard, because I think it's really about telling stories. It's about enacting good policy. It's about using that to incent investment. And then it's about making sure there's equity in how those unfold. And, Keith was talking about telling stories, and I was, in addition to being in the assembly 14, 16, 20 years ago, state assembly, I was Jerry Brown's Secretary of Natural Resources for 8 years. I went first day to last day. And there are amazing stories, because I had fire, I had water, I had a lot of the major things, and we had incredible fires in California. There was one particular fire that started outside of a town in Napa County, and 6 hours later, it burned down a residential neighborhood 11 or 12 miles away. And there was a fire on the exact same footprint in 1964, and it took 2.5 days to do what happened in 6 hours in this subsequent fire. I also did negotiations to save our compact for the cleanliness of Lake Tahoe, one of the largest freshwater lakes in the world, and we convened a science panel, and they said Lake Tahoe was heating faster than any freshwater lake on the face of the planet due to the less snowpack and other things. And I live in the beautiful, and I'm so happy that we finally have somebody that's entirely University of California bred to counter the Stanford and the Princeton and others here. I live in the town of Santa Cruz, where I was once the mayor, and 2 years ago, in the middle of summer, and we're this temperate climate with fog, we were packed and ready to go as a fire came at our town with nobody but our fire department at the city limits, and miraculously the wind changed when it was 2 miles away, but the world has changed. This is not anything you can deny. And then you go to the policy. And when I was in the state assembly, we had a situation where our government nationally walked away from the Kyoto protocols. And so we adopted Assembly Bill 32, which basically took the Kyoto protocols and put them on California and said, in California, we will go to our emissions of 1990 by 2020. And people said, it's a job killer. It's going to kill the economy. There's no specificity. And yet we met that goal 2 years early, and we moved to being the 5th largest economy on the face of the planet in the process. So those aren't true. And it really incented so much investment in clean energy and other things. We also did a million solar roofs, and we met that. It's because we did goals that created a market and incented the companies to be able to be more efficient and to do that. And so, and if you look, it's interesting because I think Terry Tamminen was talking about landfills and waste. And I was mayor of Santa Cruz in the late 1980s when the state adopted a goal that we were going to divert 50% of waste from landfills. And I remember at the time thinking, oh, geez, that's a wonderful goal. I strongly support it. We'll never do it. And just before the pandemic, we had gotten to 60%. And we incented recycling in ways that it had not been done before. And in fact, I was told when I went on the Santa Cruz City Council 40 years ago, you have a life of a landfill that is 20 years. If you stay here long enough, you'll be closing it down and you'll be siting a new one. Well, that landfill 40 years later has 33 years life. And we will probably never site another landfill because we set goals. We incented recycling. There was major investment made and it happened. And my colleagues have referred to what we just did. The governor signed 11 bills that came out of our climate bill, our climate working group, including the biggest one, which is to do interim goals and be carbon neutral in the state's own operations in about 10 years. And we did many things. I mean, they were authors of some of the bills because there's equity issues. The electric vehicles have not moved to low-income neighborhoods. They've not moved in the same ratio to low-income people. We were talking about electricity deserts, about incentives for acquisition, different things to do in that. And we're talking about well capping. We were doing high road labor agreements. We were trying to lower utility rates because we put most of our climate program on utility rates, and we were not successful in everything. We still have to come back on the high road labor agreements. We still have to come back on the electricity rates. And then when you look at the equity issues, it's interesting because if you have an electric vehicle in California, you basically don't pay the gas tax. And the gas tax is what funds the roads. So we're leaving the financing of roads to what in many times is lower middle income people, and people that are more wealthy can afford the EVs. And we have to figure out a way to fix that equity issue. On the roofs, it's finally evening out, but in the first decade of solar roofs, it was more wealthy people that did it, more wealthy people that got the tax breaks or money back from putting it on the grid. And then it's the lower income people that are subsidizing the grid, the transmission and other things, because we haven't figured out a way to totally deal with that equity issue. And that goes on in many different ways. And so those are our challenges. But I think when you look, and as Ben referenced, the budget investment was substantial this year, over $50 billion on climate related things. And it is to move into EVs. It is to move into different things that are more sustainable on water. It is to deal with trying to be ready in different ways on fire. We're trying to deal with well capping in a way that we've ignored it, and short-lived climate pollutants come from that. So And one last thing, because one of the themes of the previous speakers has been science, and I know this as the former Secretary of Natural Resources. We have tried to move science into everything we do. So we have the largest network of marine protected areas off of any of the 50 states, and it was completely science-based. We have more scientists in our Fish and Wildlife Department now than we have game wardens. I had the misfortune of supervising oil and gas extraction when I was secretary. I had a science advisor that basically talked to me in ways that we weren't relying on the industry, we weren't relying on other things. We were dealing with science, because the change that really happened is we went from 150 years since admission of the state, where our ethic was extraction of resources, to managing and moving to more sustainable resources. And then that's where we incent the kind of investment that everybody's talking about. I clearly could go on longer, but I think that I wanted to do a high level a talk about what California's done, how it's related to investment, and how we always fight the battle for equity within that.
Well, you've succeeded, Senator Laird, 100%. I think, you kind of identifying how the intention around, these initiatives, EVs, solar panels, end up almost becoming a regressive subsidy that are taxing the poor. I mean, I just think that's a fascinating way for us also to keep in mind that, governments struggle with fiscal space, given what's happening globally now on economies, even more so. So we definitely inside the UN are constantly needing to recalibrate our messaging and our advocacy for how to squeeze in transitions to clean energy in the midst of what is practically a fuel crisis as winter approaches in 2022. So I think we share a lot of that, and I really appreciate the candidness and sort of, saying how difficult these, even in, the successful California, there are challenges, and it's not simple. And you do need scientists to be advising, and you need to really move the ball forward. I really, really want to acknowledge you, Senator Allen, and Senator Becker. This has been an incredible opportunity to hear from all of you. I love that you're already planning your trip to COP27. We hope to meet you there, and maybe the Breakthrough Alliance will have a gathering. At the risk of losing my good friend Stephen in Nairobi, I promised to give him back the floor just to maybe to round out this portion around examples and the realities of tech and innovation. So Stephen, may I pass to you before I go to our final segment that focuses on education and youth advocacy and engagement?
Yes, of course, and you could never lose me. Don't worry about that, Lisa. But I did just want to ground in a couple of quick examples what I was saying earlier on about the use of innovation, and particularly the digital, here to drive for the SDGs in Kenya. So let me tack through three super quickly. The first, we've already heard that Kenya is going through, along with the Horn of Africa, one of the most severe droughts in 40 years. We're using, UN is using the Kenyan amazing digital money platform, M-Pesa, that you probably heard about, to get cash relief to almost 500,000 people across 12 counties facing acute food insecurity. In the old days, we used to truck sacks, often of American rice or wheat, up to these parts of Kenya. Now, because of M-Pesa, we're able to get money to them straight away. So about 500,000 people in families have been receiving about $60 a month per family. And why is that so much better? Cash is immediate. It gets there literally at the speed of light. It's targeted, and I'll come back to that. It's transparent, it's accountable, so there can't be any corruption around it. It's greatly cheaper. We're not paying the transport overheads, and it adds to dignity and empowerment for people. It stimulates the local economy. They can withdraw that money at the local kiosk, and then they can use it to buy straight away from local suppliers. And so finally, it's helping to build Kenya's social protection safety net, which is entirely digital. And so we're helping, WFP and UNICEF are really helping Kenya to move towards what we call a single registry system that will underpin social protection for later. And social protection has long been a main theme of the Joint SDG Fund. Second one, quickly, beginning in 2020, we had an almost biblical invasion of locusts in northern Kenya, the worst plague of locusts in 70 years. They flattened about 175,000 hectares, wiped out the livelihoods of about 164,000 people. We put together a state-of-the-art collaboration between Food and Agriculture Organization, World Bank, Government of Kenya, international NGOs, and high-tech partners. We used drones first to do mapping of areas that were affected and areas that weren't. Once we got the general picture live, we were able to use on-the-ground teams using rotary drones to do a much smaller and more precise mapping. And then finally, you bring in a third kind of drone to do the spraying and to do the locust control. All of that saved about 4.5 million metric tons of crop loss, about 900 million liters of milk production. It helped 41.2 million people remain food secure, and it probably saved close to $2 billion worth of agricultural production. And now we've got a standing command center here in Isiolo, Kenya, really high tech, would love to bring people to visit it, that actually looks at the entire subregion, going west inland and going east to the Gulf, so we can track locusts and future pests. Last thing, I mentioned the elections already. We have a major challenge here with social media, disinformation. Actually, Kenya is a major exporter of disinformation in the context of the war in Ukraine and other parts of the world, but certainly for the Kenyan elections. So what we did was we partnered with the National Cohesion and Integration Commission, which is the constitutional body here, and we set up a thing called MAPEMA, which means early, as in early warning. It's a consortium that brought together data journalists, Kenya's biggest online youth digital platform, and an AI-powered nano-influencing marketing agency. We gave comprehensive real-time social media monitoring, and then we were able to do counter-messaging. And I think that that was a major factor in these key peaceful elections. We engaged with Twitter, Meta, TikTok, Google, all the way along this. We had a total of 643 cases of hate speech and incitement that were identified over the 3 crucial months of the electoral cycle. And we debunked more than 150 really serious cases of social media-based disinformation and fake news. And now what we want to do, of course, is to wire that in as a standing constitutional capacity for Kenya. Because, of course, it's an arms race, right, on social media. The challenge is only going to get worse, but our ability to counter it is going to get better. So those are all ways, I think, in which we're trying to crowd in the digital. And I hope that makes what I said before a little bit more grounded. Thanks, Lisa.
Stephen, thank you so much. I think, you know, we are the UN on this end as well. So it's always helpful for us to remember that, you know, a locust invasion could literally lead to famine in a developing country. The reality is the slope can be very, very slippery. The risk of hate speech on a social media platform can lead to social unrest that can have devastating impacts. So I think, as it can anywhere, but I think sometimes the impact of some of these things can be felt much, much faster and much more rapid. So thank you, Stephen, for that. As I continue on this fascinating panel, and I really regret that already we're looking at the time, and I don't want to rush, but I'm really, really delighted now to really pivot towards the educational sector. And of course, with that, including youth advocacy and youth perspectives, because obviously all of the plans many of the experts on the call are putting in place are really for the next generation to really take forward, but also hopefully to take full benefit of. I'd like to begin by introducing Ms. Kirk-Ann Taylor. Kirk-Ann is the Executive Director of Climate Action Pathways for Schools and an environmental literacy leader and advocate. This is a California-based nonprofit. Kirk-Ann is the executive director, and she partners with schools to ensure that climate education programs are actually building the next generation to reduce greenhouse gases. So all of the legislation that we've learned about today obviously needs the educated voters to approve. So I think Kirk-Ann, you can probably be given some credit for that on the side of what you're building. I wonder, Kirk-Ann, you've heard a lot of what we've said so far today. We'd love to hear a little bit from your thoughts based on your expertise. What do you think, is there a critical piece for the SDGs within the career and technical education that you're broadcasting that you're helping make mainstream across your school systems.
Yes, well, thank you, Lisa, for that kind introduction. And thank you to Keith and Radhika and everyone else for today's conversation. And yeah, so I believe that school communities provide a tremendous opportunity for accelerating the SDG goals. I'll just briefly share a little bit about what we do at Climate Action Pathways for Schools. We work with under-resourced school districts to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions and save money. And we do this by providing paid internships for the high school students that help them prepare for their college and their future careers. And since 2019, we've been in partnership with Porterville Unified School District in California Central Valley. And together over the course of the last several years, we've embarked on this journey to help the district reduce its greenhouse gas emissions by 80% by 2030. And we have students like Jessica who are here with me today who are leading the charge within their district and helping to not only envision, but implement all of the changes within the district to help reach those goals. And I really think in three areas, school communities present levers for accelerating progress on climate change. Number one, we know that the current generation of youth is being asked to live with the worsening climate-related challenges and the economic instability that comes with that. And we have a responsibility to provide education and tools to address these problems equitably and inclusively. And every student should have the opportunity to learn about and take action on climate change. And so on a policy level, educational agencies from the federal, state, local, and global level should ensure that SDG goals are integrated into the curriculum across all disciplines, and not just in science, across all disciplines, and ensure that students have ways of taking action as they're learning for the benefit of climate in their local communities. And then in terms of career tech, we know that addressing climate change can offer significant opportunities for economic growth, for careers, and for our future community prosperity. And if we do this well, the steps that we take on climate action can address the economic and social injustices that we've also faced due to institutional racism and other social inequities. And so with that in mind, I think we should ensure that more students have the opportunity to engage in programs like ours that provide climate and sustainable development goals infused into career development and training programs, and they help build pathways out of poverty for low-income youth. Secondly, because schools are some of our largest systems of public infrastructure, in California, we have 10,000 schools, we have 730 million square feet of buildings. Our state spends over $15 billion every year in building, renovating, maintaining, operating school facilities. And we have the responsibility to ensure that as we're doing that in a way that's reaching our sustainability goals. And so just this year, I think thanks to Senator Allen, Senator Laird, Senator Becker, and others, we had an incredible opportunity with billions of dollars of one-time funding for school infrastructure that was included in the 22-23 budget. And there's funding coming through the Inflation Reduction Act. And I think my call is for us to make sure that we have an opportunity to include youth education and youth involvement in the implementation of those dollars on the ground in local communities. And so we should capitalize and make sure that students have the ability to build career skills as we implement these infrastructure projects. And then as we move forward, I think there's more we need to do to align our national, state, and local investments in school infrastructure with goals for decarbonizing, climate resilience, and environmental justice, and making sure that those goals are aligned with our educational equity goals. And then my last comment to address your question is really, as Mr. Tamminen shared earlier, one of the things that I'm most hopeful about is our youth and how they are mobilizing and taking action. And I think as adults, it's our responsibility to center youth voice in decisions about taking action on climate. We have so much to learn from their experiences and their needs, and we need to support them in the actions that they want to take. And we know that climate change disproportionately impacts communities of color and low-income rural and urban communities. And so to advance equity inclusion, we need to prioritize investments in those communities that have been impacted most by climate change. And in doing so, I'll just underscore again, make sure that student voice is at the center of those decision-making processes in those local communities. Thank you.
Again, thank you so much for highlighting, not only the element of education, but also in this job creation, which is a huge component of what we at the UN define when we talk about social protection systems for vulnerable groups. We talk about job creation because there has to be a sustainability element to that. And I think earlier, Radhika talked about dignity. And other speakers as well, the dignity of being able to make your own choices and to really, follow your passion, follow your dreams, but do so in a way that is able to promote your well-being as well. I'd love to pivot directly to Jessica Gonzalez, because how great is it to actually have now someone who's actually interning for Climate Action Pathways for Schools. Jessica comes to us as a senior at Monash High School in Porterville, California, an environmental science academy. She's a senior, so I'm sure she has plans in the making for life after high school. And she's actually currently working on a plan for sustainable forms of transportation for her school community. So Jessica, I'd love to hear, how does it feel to be on the inside? And what, if anything, can you share about your current project and the plans around sustainable transportation? Over to you, Jessica.
Hi, I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here today. My name is Jessica Gonzalez. I'm a senior at Monash High School in Environmental Science Academy and involved with Climate Action Pathways for Schools. About my experience in Environmental Science Academy, for my freshman year, I collected and sorted recycling. My sophomore year, I helped my classmates create a native plant plot at Monash. And junior year, I worked on finding alternatives that could replace fossil fuels, which where I focused in on is solar and wind energy. And for my plan for my senior year project is to conduct a waste audit at my school and help the school district with composting. Overall, my experience in Environmental Science Academy has provided me with so many opportunities to get involved with my community, which I believe is very important for the younger generations. Exposing them to opportunities to help their community and show them the right steps towards action against climate change they could also teach them about sustainable development goals. And I chose to enroll in the Environmental Science Academy because I thought it would be the right thing for me, since I had an interest in working outdoors and helping our ecosystem the best ways I can. And I think kids should have the opportunity to be a part of programs like these, because a lot of them don't have them, or they just don't learn about them till it's too late. And these kinds of programs should be offered to a variety of children and teenagers and young adults across the world, and so they can learn more about sustainable development goals that could help their community and the environment in general. And the reasons why I'm so dedicated to this is because I want to make a difference, even though it could be a small difference. This difference should help younger generations and get our voice into what you guys will be passing on to us. And for my personal hopes for myself in doing these programs are living the best sustainable life I can and influence others to do the same to combat climate change and promote sustainable development goals. I also would like to get a degree in environmental science. And this year I got the chance to be an intern for Climate Action Pathways for Schools. I found this to be a great opportunity because climate change is such a huge factor. It could damage so many groups in humanity, like minorities, and even outside of the humanity, like animals and plants. In this program, we can make a huge change to make human impact less harmful. And while being an intern, I've worked on projects related to composting, recycling, community outreach, and active transportation. During the summer, I participated in conducting walk audits. Our goal in this project is to survey the streets around the schools in Porterville to see how we could get students to walk to school more safely. This fall, we are surveying community members to increase usage of Porterville's Rails to Trails network. And to make transportation more sustainable, we have to fit the needs for the communities that will be using these transportations, like walking and biking. There are not enough bike lanes in Porterville to support people that already bike, which will make it unsafer, and it discourages people that don't bike to just not bike in general. And for walking, we need to make sure that these paths are safe, and especially in areas in minority parts of the town, tends to be no walking areas or just dirt paths. So these problems need to be fixed. So we must fix these problems and reach community needs if we want to truly promote sustainable transportation and sustainable development goals.
Jessica, thanks so much. I have no doubt that you're already making an impact. You're already hard at work, doing the most you can in your local community, and I can only wish you the very best as you endeavor into your next level of study. So congratulations in advance. Colleagues, we have one final speaker, Ms. Anuhia Parker, who is a Stanford University student with a focus on sustainability. And you're a recent graduate, Anuhia, right, in management science and engineering, and now you're returning to get your master's in sustainable science and practice. We'd love to hear a little bit about your passion on the intersection of ingenuity and contemporary sustainability goals. So Anuhia, over to you.
Thank you so much, Lisa. I'm so honored to be a part of this incredible conference and learn from all of these amazing panelists. And I know we're over time, so I'll try to make this short and sweet. But as a native Hawaiian, I think it's best to share a proverb from my culture to answer this question. And this proverb has guided how I've lived my life since I was a child. And it is kui keao, be of the world, to be like the world in which one lives. And so this proverb encourages me to live in interdependence with all that surrounds me physically, spiritually, emotionally, and intellectually. I think a lot of the time sustainability is often siloed into a focus that's purely environmental, but it really is an issue that needs to be tackled holistically, I think, as we've heard from all of our amazing panelists. And many Indigenous cultures already encapsulate this mindset. The SDGs work across a broad range of issues, but I'd encourage us all to adopt a perspective that's more rooted in indigeneity, working across industry, generations, and geographies to understand the impact of our solutions on an interconnected scale. And as a youth voice, I believe we should be looking to actually our ancestors and old technologies and our surrounding environment for inspiration in developing these solutions. I know we're almost out of time, but if we still have a few minutes, I'd love to share as well a chant from my culture to maybe close us out and give thanks for everything that we've learned from today.
Here, we would be so honored. Would you like to do that now, or would you like to do that after we do our maybe final closing remarks? What would be more appropriate?
I can do that after then. Yeah, that would be great.
Perfect.
Thank you, Lisa.
So no, very inspiring, and I love for us sort of also rooting ourselves as we wind up back into, you know, what inspires many of us. I mean, we learn lessons from childhood that we hopefully can only strengthen as we go forward. If we're blessed enough to have childhoods that give us those lessons, and I think you've exemplified that. You're taking it all the way through your tremendous education, and we know that you'll be a leader and activist going forward. So congratulations also on your achievements, your graduation from Stanford, and your pursuit of your master's degree. Colleagues, we are over time. That is absolutely my fault. Can you imagine the problem of having too many tremendous champions and speakers in the launch of a Breakthrough Alliance? That is the problem we've had today. But I'd like to hand back to Radhika and Keith for reflections as we try to close this out and identify next steps. So maybe Radhika, over to you.
Sure. Thank you, Lisa. And thank you to everyone who participated and to our speakers. So inspired by the climate equity theme that came out in today's dialogue in the true spirit of the SDGs of leaving no one behind. So excited about the journey forward as we innovate collectively on how we collaborate even better across geographies and sectors to combat climate change. We call on policymakers, investors, and other funders, scientists, technologists to consider collaborating via this new alliance of the United Nations Development System. Quoting Mahatma Gandhi, the difference between what we do and what we are capable of doing will suffice to solve most of the world's problems. I believe this is more true today than ever. I believe we are collectively capable of combating climate change in an inclusive and equitable manner. Thank you. Keith, over to you.
Thank you, Radhika. Today's experience has been truly a collective one, an example of public leadership and servant leadership, and collective impact and collective well-being. And I'm very pleased that everyone was here today to offer up their insight and their interest in moving forward with this conversation about attempting to accelerate the Sustainable Development Goals across the globe, and in particular here in America. And so as Climate Week at the UN continues to move forward, I would just want to echo some of the sentiments that Radhika had made, and as well as Lisa, and say thank you to our esteemed guests from across the globe, from India and from Kenya, as well as from Altasea, as well as from Climate Action Pathways, and certainly our senators, Senator Allen, Senator Becker, and Senator Laird, for their continued leadership in this space. So this is a call to action. This attempt to sort of bring together a variety of industry sectors, media, tech, and finance, and within that, arts and humanities as well, to drive this story in a new way so that folk can really see this common and shared interest, such that the SDGs can become more than a sign-off or checking off of a box, because that's not what this journey is about. So once again, thank you to the UN family and to the Joint SDG Fund and Lisa Gerbiel and Elaine Gensler, and as well as Elizabeth Tazo for their support and this Breakthrough Alliance moving forward.
Keith and Radhika, thank you so much. We wouldn't be here today with all these esteemed panelists and speakers without the two of you. So your commitment to the SDGs, your commitment to equality and breaking through discrimination at all levels, and the impact that has, and how people suffer accordingly is really remarkable. I'm inspired by the both of you. I'm also inspired by the team that is behind me and next to me in all the efforts that we do at the fund. Liz Paterzo and Elaine Genzer are two of our team members, and I just want to salute them, because without them, this wouldn't have happened either. So, and really just to say, please watch this space. This is the launch, which is the first step really of what we hope to be an exciting alliance of unexpected and surpassed expectations. We had outreach to some heads of state who of course are here in New York this week. We have had apologies from several who wanted to join us. The Prime Minister of Fiji, who actually is hosting his own event about his ocean economy as we're hosting our event. So there was a clash of schedules, but I know that we could certainly take even some of the ideas and concepts that were shared today already. We could package up and start communicating directly with countries like Fiji, governments of small island developing states and beyond. So I have no doubt that there'll be success. And I just want to thank you all again for your time, for staying over time. I know your time is precious, and we can't wait to connect again. So thank you so much, and to be continued. Stay well and be well.
Who's chant? We're having a chant by
yes, and of course, and over to Anuheya for the beautiful chant as we close. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. So this chant is to give thanks for the hospitality, love, generosity, and knowledge that has been given to us. And it also gives thanks to the beauty of our environment and all of the people that work to protect it. Uholaya kamakaloala, pua ike alohala. Kuka ia kahaloala, pavehi maina lehua, mai koho oku ia kahalavaila, mahalo e na akua, mahalo e na kupuna ea. Mahalo me ke aloha. Mahalo me ke aloha.
Excellent.
Beautiful.
Thank you, Anu. It's beautiful.
Thank you. Am I sensing that no one wants to leave?
Isn't this good? Usually people are like, what I was observing is our count did not go down, even though we went over time. And
No, I love it.
I've never been in an event where it doesn't go down towards the end on a Zoom. And
We're all still here. Okay, well, let's just keep.
yeah, we're here. Rajesh, sorry about the slide. We would have loved to see your slides, but amazing, as Lisa said, good problem that so many amazing speakers so
Exactly.
engaged.
Exactly.
No problem at all. I think I'm